Hi quilters, I'm Pam Heller, AccuQuilt's cutting expert. Today we are so excited to have quilts from the amazing quilt artist Teresa Coates. I'm going to chat with her in just a few minutes, but until then, let's check out some of her quilts. Hey Teresa, so glad that you're here today.
Thank you, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you about the quilts that are hanging in our gallery. So before we get started, Teresa, do you want to just tell us a little bit about how did you start your quilting journey?
Well, I started quilting, so my grandmother, my great-grandmother actually is a quilter, and I found out later my grandmother was a quilter, but I hadn't really spent any time with my grandma, and I didn't really understand her. So I only learned about this later. So when I started quilting, I was actually a new mom and I was pregnant with my son.
Wow.
And I realized that like every baby needs a quilt, right?
Right.
They just do. So I'm not sure where I got that idea, but I did. And I think it's right. I think it's a valid argument that every baby deserves one. So I made a little sailboat quilt for my son using, you know, the old cereal box templates and scissors and drawing things out and cutting it out. It's very funny because now I look at it and I'm like, it's so poorly done, but it really was done with love. So they started there, and then every baby that came, my nieces, nephews, all of them, they all got little baby quilts. And that was
got those cute little quilts. That's amazing. And so now though, what kind of quilts do you like to create?
I really like to make quilts that are a little bit different. I like to work with funky fabrics. It's kind of been a thing for me for a little while, probably about 8 years maybe, is like the more interesting the fabric, the better. And I really like to work in all the different techniques that I can possibly find.
Right. So one of the things I love about the quilts that are here in our gallery is they're part of the American Travel Series. So talk a little bit about why did you create a travel series?
So I've been wanting to sort of pursue like the art quilts and figuring out how do I want to like have a voice in this world of making quilts and not just making quilts because it's a cool design, but actually like, coming up with my own designs. And I used to travel pre-pandemic with work, and I traveled almost half the time. I was on the road teaching at quilt shops, and so I really got to see a lot of the country, and I really kind of fell in love with it in a different way. And I came back home and got stuck here and kind of realized that I missed it a lot. And my boyfriend and I ended up going for a trip last August. We decided we're going to hit the road for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Him for 2 weeks, me for one. And we just basically went through California, Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, South Dakota, and into Nebraska. And that's where I flew home from work.
Excellent. You should have come to visit. We would have loved to have had you there. Just hadn't known that.
So from that, I took a lot of inspiration. I kind of thought about it when I was out there that I wanted to create something that would kind of, I don't know, make a difference for me and kind of say the things about seeing the country, the geology, the people, all of that. And so I decided I would do a series, and I decided on a size, and then I've just kind of gone from there, and each one has a different inspiration.
Right. And you know, it's so funny because before there was a pandemic, traveled every week as well. You know, I'd travel on a Thursday, come home on Saturday, and I have seen all but one of the U.S. states. And that same idea of, it was such a great experience to see the geography and the landscape, and to find, you know, it was different than it is in Utah, than it is in Alabama, or, you know, those kind of places. I love it. So let's talk about a couple of your quilts. We're going to talk about 4 of them that are in the series. The reason I like this quilt, 2 reasons. First of all, I'm a huge modern quilter, so I love those bright colors, the deep blues and the bright teals and orange and yellow. But the thing I really love most about it is it's just a whole bunch of fabric cut up into scrap and tiny little pieces. And I think about with AccuQuilt users, how we always are talking about stash busting and scrap busting, and how great this would be to just be able to create this project using tiny little equilateral triangles or tiny little squares from our cubes, or even tiny little half square triangles. Really great thing to notice about this is that every single piece in this entire quilt was quilted. It took days to quilt it. It's called Prismatic Portal.
So that one is actually based on the Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone. So we went there. That was one of our things, is we went through a bunch of national parks when we were out on the road. And that one is just, it's kind of mind-blowing when you see it.
It is
so amazing, and so many colors and so bright. And so that was one of them that I really wanted to focus on because the colors were so fun. And I tend to lean toward neutrals, and this was just such a bright rainbow quilt. And I've never made a rainbow quilt, but this one sort of ended up being one. So I worked with my boyfriend, Hawk, and he is an artist. And so we worked together, and we basically pulled a bunch of fabrics, and then we worked through a bunch of techniques, and it's all kind of collaged on top. And then he put it together and quilted the whole thing. And then we quilted, you could see individually around each little square.
You tell Hawk he did a great job quilting it, because that was the first thing I noticed, was like, oh, somebody went around each one of those tiny little pieces to do that.
Every single one. And he sat there for days doing this little thing. And I was like, thank you. Because honestly, like I wanted to make it, and I knew I didn't have enough time, and I knew that he had the eye to do it. And it was wonderful to see it come together and actually have it be what I had imagined it could be.
Right.
But not having actually made it happen. It was a great experience. It was absolutely wonderful. And I love that sort of collaboration.
Yeah, I just think it's fabulous. And when I looked at it, I thought I should do one of my journey when I went to Niagara Falls, because I went in the wintertime. So it has a whole different effect than if you see it in the summertime. So what a great inspiration. But I love this quilt because she uses different kinds of fabric and texture, and the color is beautiful. What I really like about this quilt is that the background is that solid piece that just looks like a piece on a map.
So Horseshoe Bend is actually kind of a funny story, because this was an area that we went through on our trip, and we were in the area. We didn't really know we were in the area. And we were needing a restroom stop. So we stopped at a place, and we realized we would have to pay to get in. And he said, well, we could just, it's only like $5. You can go, it's a beautiful view. It's like a 10-minute walk. We were like, no, we're kind of in a hurry. So we just went through and we used the restrooms, and then we left. And then we went to a gas station, and we saw all of the postcards for Horseshoe Bend, and we had literally just passed it. So my view of Horseshoe Bend is basically just on the map. So that's what that is about.
I was like, I've been to Horseshoe Bend, and it doesn't look anything like that unless you're looking at a map.
Unless you're looking at a map, which is the only way I've seen it, is from the map and on postcards.
And did you go back and see it in real life?
We were like, next time.
Next time you're in Horseshoe Bend, you should be.
But we were so close. We were in the parking lot.
You were a 5-minute walk away. You could have just seen that breathtaking view. That's wonderful.
So now we just have an excuse to go back.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so Dignity is traditional patchwork, often like a Lone Star quilt. You could totally use diamonds that we can cut with a die here. So talk a little bit about Dignity.
So I actually use 2.5-inch strips, which I have a die for. And so I was able to use that and put those together. So it is a Lone Star quilt, and I designed it. The colors that I chose especially for it are based on the Dignity statue that is in Chamberlain, South Dakota. So she's a large Native American woman standing over the freeway. Yeah. So that's the blanket that she's holding. And so I wanted to make a quilt that sort of represented that, and it was interesting traveling so much and seeing so much native land, I guess. And it was really poignant for me to see her standing there above the highway with her big quilt hanging off the back. And I really wanted to make something that sort of, brought that. And I love the Lone Star quilt. I've done a few of them. It was super, super great quilt. It's actually really easy to put together, like surprisingly easy.
Right. With dye especially. Because
yeah, exactly. You just, sew them together, do the strips. It's great. So that's what that one is about. It's about that, the Native woman.
Okay, this is giving me such a new perspective as I think about all the places that I traveled and what I should be doing here. This last piece is called Wyatt Wolf. And there's some really incredible things about this quilt. First of all, Teresa used the pattern by the amazing quilt artist Violet Craft and did foundation paper piecing as part of the method to create this quilt. But she also works for Shannon Fabrics, so watch this. She said I could touch it and pet it. So it has this great three-dimensional look to it, and it's beautiful, nice and soft. So when I think about a wolf, you think about their fur and how soft they would be. And this is such a great representation of it. Ironically, this is actually a quilt I myself made out of Kona fabrics and some grunge. I did it for a charity quilt a few years ago, again using that same pattern from Violet Craft.
And this is kind of a crazy project that is actually made out of a bunch of what we call Luxe Cuddle fabrics.
Right.
So they're the longer plush fabrics, and then also some actual faux fur is in there, and then mixed it with some cotton. So it was a crazy process and super fun. It was really, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. I was like, this will be my magnum opus.
Right. I thought the same thing when I made it, because I will tell you, I don't make a quilt if there isn't a die for it. I mean, why would I? Except for this one. And I actually met Violet last year in Kansas City, or 2 years ago, I guess, at Quilt Market. And I told her that. I said, listen, this was the only one. And it took me truly probably 6 months to make it, because you know, that foundation paper piecing, I'd never really done it before. So what a great way to kind of use cuddle fabric and different fabrics. I just love that.
Well, it's wonderful because you can literally pet the wolf now. I worked really hard to make sure that the nap goes the right way. So please touch it. Okay?
We're going to touch it. It'll be great. So what are you working on now, Teresa?
So I have a couple of more projects that are in that American Travels quilt series that I'm doing. So I have one that's based on the Canyonlands near the Grand Canyon that I'm working on that I'm really excited about, and another one that's sort of secret at this point. But, I have a bunch of them.
In your trips, did you make it to Arches in southern Utah?
I have not. I've actually seen very little of Utah.
Okay, next trip, when you're doing it, go to Moab, Utah, one of the most beautiful places on earth, Arches National Park.
We went to, is it Zion that's over there?
Yeah, Zion's.
We went through Zion. So Zion has to have a quilt too, because that's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Arches, I've heard, is just sort of mind-blowing.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, we're so excited to have your quilts. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. Have a good day.